Hello, everyone. We've added this note to the beginning of all of our original episodes of the podcast to let you know of a few changes that have happened around here and hopefully avoid any confusion for you as listeners. When we began this podcast, it was called Starseed Survival Guide, and most people called me, your host, by my birth name, Erin. Throughout the first 22 episodes, you'll hear me introduce myself as Erin, hear others refer to me as Erin, and hear many references to the name of the show being Starseed Survival Guide. In 2018, more and more folks began calling us Yaya, and in March of 2020, we changed the name of this podcast to Earthside Survival Guide to more accurately reflect our intentions for the show. For a little more of the full story of what these changes mean to us, please check out episode 23, a temple talk where we reflect on where we've been, where we are now, and where we're going. We thank you for your patience during this transition, for listening and sharing this journey with us, and most importantly, for allowing us to continue to grow and evolve. Blessings.
And as I call in the east, I walk into the stream, and as I call in the south, I bring water to my mouth, and as I call in the west, the creek swallows my chest, and as I call in the north, I am swallowed by her soul.
Greetings, Starseeds, and welcome to the Starseed Survival Guide podcast. I'll be your host, Erin Rivera Merriman, and I'm honored to facilitate a place for us to virtually gather to be seeded, activated, and germinated by the infinite well of galactic and terrestrial wisdom that is available to all in every moment. Thank you for hearing the call, for remembering that there is so very much more to life, and showing up to explore the secret, esoteric, mystical, and unorthodox pathways to liberation that are and forever will be open to you and all who seek them with sincerity. We welcome and hail to the guardians and the gatekeepers who dwell eternally in the liminal realms. We humbly beseech your assistance today in opening these portals between the dimensions so that those who have tuned in with this transmission may find themselves able to listen from a deeper place and receive the hybrid medicine and restructuring that the helper spirits who called this broadcast into being so generously provide. May you as sacred listeners hear what you need to hear and discard anything that is not of value to your own stated intentions for your life and the fulfillment of your soul's purpose in the most enjoyable, most beautiful possible way. Starseed Survival Guide is a listener-supported program, and we hope that if you find value in the experience we share here today, that you might consider offering support by visiting us online at www.activeculturefamily.com and making a purchase or donation. Many blessings to you on your journey, and we hope you enjoy the show. Greetings, Starseeds! It's me, Erin, and I'm thrilled to be joined here today by sacred mushroom mentor and guide Shonagh Holme. Shonagh is a writer, poet, shamanic therapist, and teacher of the shamanic arts. She is an international public speaker on the subject of visionary shamanic spirit medicine, a voice of stewardship for the honeybees, and a teacher on the subject of traditional foods. She is also the author of several books, including Ix Chel Wisdom, 7 Teachings from the Mayan Sacred Feminine, and Love and Spirit Medicine. Welcome, Shonagh. It's a delight to be speaking with you today.
Oh, thank you, Erin. It's great to be here.
Well, I'd like to start out by saying how much I've been looking forward to connecting with you again after the deep journeys we were able to share this summer.
That was amazing. Yeah, I have very fond memories of that, as I know you do as well.
So part of me is always in a process that I call crunching the cosmic equation, where I'm looking at the known factors or what's presently occurring and trying to figure out different variables to see which way the wind is blowing. So it's part of how my intuition works, but it's really very rational and more like algebra than magic. And what I'm observing right now is that it seems like a lot of people are being awakened and accelerated, and that anyone who has latent abilities is having them kind of spontaneously pop open, whereas in the past we may have had to cultivate them for decades or even lifetimes through practice. So it stands to reason that spirit wouldn't do this for no reason. And I've taken this as a sign that something big is coming for which everyone is needed.
So in our time together, the elves spoke through you as oracle and channel, and they hinted at this as well. Change is coming to our plane. I'll be sharing some moments of the recordings from our time together for our listeners throughout our conversation today, so they can begin to get a feel for the way you work. Here is just a little taste of the elves in action.
All right, let me see if I can open it up. I love you. They put us together. Are you fucking kidding me? Do you think this is an accident? I'm gonna just, see. Hang on. They gave a whole message. I don't know if you heard. You were deep in the piece. Let me see if they will come.
Hot all of a sudden, actually. Like, I just got, like, super hot all of a sudden.
We'll come again, as we've come so many times before. And now you say, this is the hour, bringing to the both of you, man. Secrets you'll soon know. We only select the ones who will create the change that Earth must have. So dear, daughter of the sun, she thinks she's all alone, dear. We smile, but it's not true. Through this fine woman will tell you that you are loved beyond all time. We'll provide you with rhyme that you will not forget.
I was deeply touched by the familiarity and obvious depth of your relationship to the fairy realm. I read an article in a national publication this summer that was written by what I would call a non-believer, and she kind of casually remarked that listening to the voice of the little people was a low priority given all the, quote, real struggles that we're facing. Can you share a little bit about when your connection to the fairy realm began and how you cultivated those connections you made there, and maybe why it's important and maybe more important than ever to come home and kind of humble ourselves to the wisdom and teachings of these elemental beings?
Sure. Well, first of all, when I was a young girl, I was deeply connected to the fairy realm. I would search my garden daily and try to find them. I knew they were there. I never actually saw them with my eyes, but what I realize now is this is a relationship cultivated through the inner eye and through the portal of the heart. And so I always felt them. And I also had a relationship with a tree that grew in front of our house, and I would sit in its branch daily. And when we moved, when I was finished with 7th grade, we moved to the States from Toronto. And I said a formal goodbye to that tree. I said a formal goodbye to the beings in my garden, and mourned that loss. It felt like a loss to me. And I also, at a young age, devoured Andrew Lang's series of books, the Blue Fairy Book, the Red Fairy Book. Those are compilation of old fairy tales. This is not Disney garbage. These are old folk tales that were passed down for a long time. And I just, something touched me. And so, then I grew up and I got, of course, kind of not exactly assimilated. I never was assimilated, but, I functioned in the material world. And it really wasn't until I hit 40 and had a midlife face slap, and everything in my life was thrown into question, and I became a voracious student of the mysteries. I still am, and entered the realms of shamanic exploration. And then I am now 53. So 5 years ago, I began working with the mushroom. And to that point, I don't drink, I don't do anything recreationally. And so I approached that with great reverence. And it turned out, very unexpectedly, it turned into a year of monthly shamanic immersions. The first 5 or 6 of them were out in the wild rainforest of the Pacific Northwest, in the mossy temple of that area. And so those were very cumulative. And what ended up happening was, first of all, over a period of time, I came into a very old form of mediumship, which is very deeply shamanic and long the domain of women. Think of the oracles at Dodona and Delphi. And so being a nature spirit would come in. It was as if we were both experiencing each other in that moment. And eventually they began speaking through me. And this is the nature spirits. This is very old. And I am a woman of Celtic blood. And so the Celts were long known for their old Europeans, actually, whether they were Scandinavian, German, Celtic, the Gaels, they were deeply connected to nature. And they understood that spirits were in trees and stones, in wells, in bodies of water. They were connected to beings that were thought of as fairy, or this may well have been a kind of ancestral worship that goes very far back. But eventually they were seen as different races. There's the elf race, which was known as Alfar, A-L-F-A-R. That was an old Norse word. And so there were different races of elves and fairy races. And these were and are intelligences. I see them as very ancient wisdom keepers. They are a kind of watcher. I'm looking out my window at my forest as I say this. And they are accessible to those who open to them. It's like you have to shift states of consciousness to access these beings. And I am unmoved by those who declare that this is nonsense or this is fantasy, because of my own experiences in bringing these beings through. They carry a very deeply touching wisdom. And they have said, this is not parlor tricks. We are not here to tell you your fortune. We are here to open you to a very old wisdom that your kind has lost. And we have, because I see zero wisdom playing out before us in the media shit show that is on display. And to me anyway, the real world is the world of nature. This other is a construct. And as Shakespeare knew that, all the world's a stage and everyone a player on it. And so, when you engage nature, you are in a very real place, and you are connecting to life itself. You're not connecting to a device with manufactured images. And if you can still yourself, then maybe, just maybe, and open yourself to feel, you're going to have a very unique experience where you are going to sense into the intelligence of a tree, or the intelligence of a stone, or a body of water, and you're going to leave there very different. You're going to leave there moved in some way. That's a very long answer, but there you are.
Beautiful. So for me, I find that the way that, these other dimensional beings are often portrayed in TV or books creates a kind of expectation that actually prohibits us from recognizing when we are in contact with the true essence of these beings, because we're expecting something else, and dismissing the real experience. Like I always thought an angel would be a beautiful woman with white wings, and it took me a long time to connect that this kind of like very vast, fierce energy that I had a connection with was in fact angelic. So what advice would you give to someone who's really longing to commune more deeply with the fairy realm and or elves or nature spirits, but just has that doubt still as to whether or not what's happening for them is real? What might be some ways that people could strengthen this connection and make it more personal and alive for them in their life?
Okay, well, the first thing to remember is just about everything we know we've been told, and it's all been this input from outside, input from the system we are in. We have been raised in a system. I always say, we show up, we are raised by people who are under the spell to whatever degree. Then we go to school. That's serious imprinting. Well, we watch television, all that media, right? So we have just been bombarded with imprinting. And there is little to no encouragement for us to go within. And these realms are subtle. And we're in a very just wham bam, thank you ma'am, where's the next peak experience kind of culture. And this is bothering me, where's the pill to make it go away? And these realms, it's like your conditioning, because we've been so hyper conditioned, it doesn't apply. In fact, it's a hindrance in these realms. And so we have to be able to let that go to the degree that we can. It's very important to be able to just learn how to still ourselves. Look at all the stimuli that is thrown at us in this culture. And that informs me. I see that as, of course, there's a reason. Someone wants us highly stimulated and diverted. In other words, anything but actually going into those silent states where you can sit and tune into these they are subtle frequencies. And then the doubt piece, when we go into doubt, and doubt, I have been plagued by that, through my life. It's a kind of program, if you will. And so it's part of our conditioning as well. We're not taught to have great confidence in ourselves necessarily. And so doubt weakens you. And I remember reading a book by Rosita Arvigo called Sastun about her apprenticeship with the Mayan shaman Don Eligio Panti. And one of the things he said to her was, Rosita, when you are working in this way, you must never doubt. Never doubt. It weakens the magic. And so that will be something that we simply must work through the doubt, with the understanding that it's part of our programming, because it is, and to just endeavor to remember that it's, I tell people, especially people I work with, and then they're about to leave and go back to their home, and I say, just remember, it's a thick spell out there. We are all spellbound. I think this whole thing is a ginormous, mysterious spell of some kind, truly. And so with that in mind, you can think, all right, it's a spell. I'm going to see now. I'm going to see through this spell. And that is when you can best connect to those beings.
I like how you said that, the kind of commitment of deciding I'm going to see through the spell. Because that's been my experience of what really chews the doubt away in a more permanent kind of way. It was a choice. And it didn't feel like faith. And people are like, oh, you have to have faith. It felt like, no, I'm choosing to move forward on the basis of these subtle personal truths over what anyone else is validating, because I need them to be true in order to want to be here. And by be here, I mean like be on the planet in these times. Like, I need these things to be true. So I'm deciding that they are. And if I'm wrong at the end of my life, I will be fine with that, because I will have done my best to embody my personal truth. So I will have been successful on that account, even if I'm totally wrong. And something about really declaring that shifted everything, where now all of the things really do occur to me in a much more real way and like feel like undeniable magic. So I almost feel like there's some degree of like testing in the doubt that we feel. I don't know. That's an idea I'm playing with. Yeah. It's just,
yeah. Well, also I should say that the early Europeans were not the only people on this planet to have that understanding and communion with the nature spirits. Also, the Native Americans in the Americas also had relationships with what they called the little people.
yeah.
And so just good to know. In other words, this isn't just some sort of conjecture. This knowledge was understood among many different people on the planet. And so just because now the mindset has shifted, which really happened with the onslaught of the revolution, the Industrial Revolution, that shifted everything. And I see all of that as what has happened is we have this overlay now on something that was very natural, a very natural harmony, a very natural relationship that mankind had with nature for a long time. And not to glamorize, that all those centuries ago, because they had their issues, but for God's sake, they were very connected.
Yeah, and I like how you were putting this conversation about like the elemental realm or the fairy folk or the elves just in the broader category of nature spirits. That kind of leads me to the next piece that I wanted to ask you about. When we first connected, you mentioned the owl within our first conversation, but I didn't really expect her to be so present for me. I was kind of doing that thing of like, that's Shonagh's teacher. She's just here because Shonagh's here. She's not here for me, for a few hours.
Yeah.
And at some point I started to actually, just realize that she was talking to me, and was really honored and surprised and just moved by that, but what she told me was that she's a powerful ally for those struggling to overcome addiction. and proceeded to illuminate all the subtle and not so subtle ways that consumer culture exploits our human capacity for addiction and kind of poisons our relationship to the natural world and the present moment, and to food and to love and the free natural resources that we need in order to thrive here. So Owl was showing me how indoctrination under the guise of education interferes with the absorption of our most fundamental human experiences. And I wanted to share a little recording here from our time together so people can kind of hear what that looked like, if that would be okay with you.
Please.
Okay, I really had this like when I was going to sleep very clearly, like the consolidation of my issue is, growing up in this family with someone who was an addict and died of his addiction. It all comes back to that, like why I'm not like cooking more for my son, why I'm not enjoying spending time with my family. If I'm like really honest with how it feels to be with my family, I'm desperate to get away. I'm counting the minutes to get away so I can be alone in pursuit of my addiction.
Bam, bam.
And so I'm like, oh, that was my dad. All of that rejection, all of this rejection I've carried within me for so long. There was no rejecting. He was just counting the seconds till it was time to be away from us so that he could be free to pursue his addiction. There's alcohol. Yep. And because I'm not an alcoholic, I had no idea that this dynamic is playing out.
Yes, and you will tie the whole thing back to, because Natasha talks about this, alcohol addiction, all these addictions. That's why she calls it gut and psychology syndrome. Because when this thing is completely imbalanced, what responds? This.
Yeah.
So we're not thinking straight, and we become addicts in some way.
I just want to feel wholesome. I just want to be wholesome. And when I die of old age, I want my chalk white bones to taste also the birds and the bees and the wild horses of the sea and the roots of the trees growing down deep into the backbone of the beast, into the spine of our country, America, the beautiful, my home. Her roots run deep beneath my naked feet. I call her power into my bones, and she takes my swollen grief and turns it into trees. America's spirit dances down my throat, into my chest that beats for pagan liberty. The mountains of America are my home. You best leave me in the mountains here alone.
So you have such a deep connection to Owl as a guide. I'm wondering if you might speak to what the medicine of White Owl has been for you, and if it resonates with you, this idea that she might be something of a specialist in addiction.
Okay, well, first I will say that one of my great teachers, his name was Brewjoy, he's since passed on, but he said something to me that I never forgot. He said, when an animal appears to you and it is white, it is a sacred animal. And so white simply being, just as you hear of white buffalo, and so right away it says, this is elevated, it's saying, pay attention. And so during that year of monthly mushroom immersions that were a kind of training where I essentially apprenticed myself to the mushroom teachers, I had so many synchronicities relating to Owl. And one of them was around month 4, I got back from a particularly profound weekend where on the medicine out in the forest, I had this whole conversation with an owl. And I get home and I get a phone call from someone I know who is Native American, who does exquisite medicine pieces and is a master beater. And they said, I have something here. It was bequeathed to me, but it doesn't belong to me. And you've been on my mind so much lately. I was told this piece belongs to you. And I asked what it was, and they said, well, I really want you to come here and see it. And I said, well, could you just tell me? And they said, it is the tale of a snowy white owl. And so I almost fell to my knees because at that point I was thinking, what on earth is going on? This incredible synchronicity, this magic, what is happening? And so when that piece was created for me, the day it arrived was a day that I was going into the medicine by myself. I had before that been doing the medicine with a dear friend of mine. And we became lovers, and then he ended that abruptly. And so I went in very bereft and actually in a place of power. You wouldn't think so, but I was stripped completely, which is a very good place for an initiate to be when you are preparing to cross a threshold, because nothing is in the way. And that is when White Owl came to me in that journey. And she appeared as a woman with long white hair and piercing blue eyes and a dress of luminous white owl feathers. And she said, I am White Owl, I'm your medicine, and I will work with you, daughter who longs. She called me daughter who longs, and she said, you will be birthed tonight from daughter who longs to daughter who knows. And then what ensued was the kind of, maybe you would call it a mystical experience that changed my life forever. And so Owl has long been the guardian and guide of the seer. Owl sees in the dark. So Owl sees what others can't, and Owl sees what others won't. Now, when it comes to addiction, well, we could say that the one who is addicted is under a very potent spell. And spells really only work if you believe in them. Words are very powerful things. We curse with words. We can uplift with words. And we can shred with words. All right, so if you have Owl working with you and you are highly addicted, well, Owl is going to help you see. Owl is going to help you see the far deeper layers beneath the surface story of your addiction, or why you're addicted, or why you must stay so. It'll take you far deeper than that. It'll give you, shall we say, a bird's eye view. And when you have that, you get a far greater understanding of what exactly is going on. And then you are in a place of power in that now you have more of a choice, because you're not so blind anymore, right? When we don't know, we can say, I was in the dark, I didn't know. And so Owl ensures, no, you're no longer in the dark. We're going to look at this and we're going to see just exactly what you are running from, or we're going to see what that person is doing to you and why exactly you find them so compelling, right? And so when we have this far greater understanding, I mean, look, this is what a lot of these plant medicines will do for addicts. They'll take ibogaine perhaps, or they'll take ayahuasca or even mushroom, and they'll have, hopefully, maybe, no guarantee, but possibly a kind of illuminating experience where they see the whole picture. And all of a sudden they get it, and now they're able to end the addiction, right? And so Owl brings that kind of medicine forward so that you can see truly.
That resonates with me, the way you're describing, just like bird's eye view, because one of the things that I saw, it was almost just like these hell realms with bodies everywhere and this war zone, and it was like these owls were flying really low and grabbing people by the talons that were still salvageable. They were like, we found a live one, and pulling them up to this other realm and cleaning them off and kind of instilling that bigger picture of purpose. There's a lot about divine purpose, and addiction being like something that happens when you lose, or maybe perhaps you never had a sense of purpose, or you lose touch with the things that give you a sense of divine purpose. Then you become open to all of the seductions of the consumer culture.
Yeah. Or you really don't want to see, you are running from something perhaps very painful, or you're running even from responsibility. This, of course, happens as well, right? And so, but I find that Owl will bring you to that awareness, but she does it with wisdom. She does it with grace and kindness. And she can be very stern as well, but it is done with so much love. And so that, yes, there comes a time when you must see, you must look at it. You can no longer run, because that which you resist persists. That's a truism. And so you have to finally see it, and also perhaps ask the question of, all right, that was horrendous, and how did it serve? We know how it victimized. We know how it destroyed. How did it serve? That is an entirely different way of looking at something. And that forces you have to take those several steps back past the triggering, activating piece to this place of almost impersonal, where you can look at it from that place and see the greater passion play that is going on, and then seek out the wisdom from that. That's where we call the wisdom. Unfortunately, wisdom is usually hard won, and I would say well worth the effort. And Owl is associated with wisdom in a big way, isn't it? All about wisdom.
Beautiful. Thank you. So on a personal level, for me, the addictions that were being revealed was a lot around like addictions to conveniences, and how it's really not serving, because the idea that it frees up all this extra time, that the time that we harvest by participating in like conveniences, it tends to be like, at least for me, it was extra time that I had to pursue unhealthy relationships and unhealthy habits. So it was, yeah, that's convenient in and of itself, that by like kind of purchasing commodities that promise convenience, then you just end up having more time to do more addictive behaviors. And so this kind of leads to the next, powerful piece of my journey was the food, that by, eating prepared foods, and that time that I was saving, that I was using it to, indulge in unhealthy relationship patterns. And that when I read on your website that you work with the ancestral foods, I was just kind of like, oh, that's nice. That was the extent of the thinking that I did about it. I really was not prepared for how much of a part of my personal journey that would be, and how just like radically reoriented around food I would be when I left, and after just like a few short days. For me, it felt like I forged this alliance with these kind of cosmic council of grandmothers, and that were speaking through you, and around the wisdom of ancestral foods, and taking the time and putting the love into the preparation of feeding myself, feeding my family. And it felt, by the time I left, it felt like I really belonged to them. Like I had made some kind of an agreement, and then that I would follow their instructions as a primary directive over other guides or other instructions. There was a choice that the grandmother's wisdom was always going to be the most trustworthy voice in the choir to listen to. And So it seemed like it was grandmothers of all cultures together, not necessarily my grandmother, and that they were, like, as a council, reaching through this veil across time to remind us and teach us about these kind of ancient forms of protective magic, really. And it feels now like I'm engaging my food as this internal alchemy and spellcraft even. Can you speak a little bit about your connection to the grandmothers and your journey with ancestral foods?
Sure. Okay. I've always, my whole life, eaten, I would say, just very, very healthy. And actually, I need to clarify that, because I hear people say, yeah, I eat healthy, and I'm horrified when I hear how they eat. So I eat fat. I love, good meats, raw dairy, if I can get it. Just real food. I like real food. I never liked margarine. I thought it was disgusting. I still do. I never liked fast food. It was repulsive to me. I always joke that if you want to duplicate a Mars bar in your own kitchen, you'll need a degree in chemistry. Like, just, that modern foods, or really they are the foods of, commerce. This is all commercial foods. Disgust me. And so I never went on diets, any of those low fat, whatever, any of these nonsense diets. They just never made sense to me. And so it wasn't really until probably, 10 years ago, 10 or 11 years, I did almost a year. I did try raw vegan. I did. And I almost destroyed my health. And that started quite by accident, because I did a deep cleanse, and then I was reading different books, and I came across the veganism thing, and I decided to try it. And, after about a year, I was climbing the walls, and I did everything, quote unquote, that I thought was right. And I followed David Wolf and all these guys, and then I found my way to Sally Fallon, who I consider to be a woman, a true elder who carries that grandmother wisdom. God bless her. What she is bringing back and the lives that she's changed is amazing. And so I started learning everything I could about actual ancestral foods, realizing, my goodness, I've been drawn to this my whole life. I just didn't, quite have all the ingredients, if you will. And so that includes broths, good broths made from chicken bones or beef bones. And that in and of itself is a very high alchemical piece, because human beings have been making soup since we were living in caves. In fact, hot rocks would be put into the animal's carcass to draw out the juices, and water would be put in, and people would drink that. And people were very, very vigorous. We are made to think like we're so healthy, and people back then were not, and they only lived to the age of 35 or whatever. And at times they didn't live very long, but at other times, we have the Roman scholar Plutarch, who traveled the British Isles around 2,000 years ago. And one of his comments was, those British Islanders don't show their age till they're 120. And the students of Pythagoras lived to 115, 109. I mean, living past 100 was a no-brainer. And so there were people who were very hale and hearty. And this went on for quite some time, until really the foods of industry started showing up. But broth is incredibly, profoundly healing to the body. And it contains gelatin and collagen that are, the building blocks of our skin, all our tissues. And this is something we used to drink every day. And then, a few centuries ago and beyond, there was often a huge cauldron. And there would be a community cauldron, a big one, right? And so that was always full. Nothing went to waste. And that was a symbol of the goddess and of the, the mother of abundance. And that would feed and nourish and fortify the people. And so soup is very important. And then fermented foods, refrigeration, though convenient, and I have one as well, but we stopped fermenting our food, and then our gut flora went down the tubes. And 85% of the immune system is in the gut. And then there is a neural highway network between the gut and the brain. And so not only do we need fermented foods and healthy gut flora, we need fat, good saturated animal fat. And so I have two daughters, one in college, one who's almost 16. I have raised them, I feed them and myself everything the system tells us not to eat. And so they drink raw milk, they eat raw butter, liver. We do liver. Yes, I get that in my girls. I'll slip it in when I can. You know, all of these, and then good fats, fat on their meat. Oh my goodness, yes, yes. And enough butter on, you know, whatever they're putting butter on that you can see your teeth marks in it. And so as a result, you know, they're very, very healthy girls. And so you are what you eat. And also I must say, with all of this age of feminism and women can be out in the work world, I see a lot of this as trickery. I mean, I am all for women, you know, having a fair shot and women having, you know, right, of course, obviously. And I will say that as a woman, I see it, and I know my ancestor just did as well, as my divine right to feed my family, to feed and nourish and grow the people in my family who I love. And then I have women like you who come and stay with me for 4 days. I do these immersions, these very deep, deep immersions. And food is a huge part of that because, you know, when you came, you had your piece that you wanted to visit and resolve. And my goodness, I mean, I could not shower you enough with good broth at my table, as you well know. And then it has shifted you dramatically. And, you know, convenience kills. That is a ruse. That is an absolute, that is just trickery. This whole idea of, oh yes, this is convenient. Yes, eat our corporate food and leave aside what has been passed down in your tribe, clan, family for countless generations, and eat our garbage. And, you know, is it any wonder that people are as sick as they are today? And children are sick as well. And so the good news is we can heal. And I will share, there is a woman who I see as a real shamaness, a Russian doctor named Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride. And I've turned you on to her good work. She is curing autism. She is curing epilepsy. She is curing rheumatoid arthritis and other autoimmune diseases, because it all goes back to the gut, which after all, our old friend Hippocrates, who's only the godfather of modern medicine, had said, all disease begins in the gut. And so she is curing with what? Broth, of all things, and good fats and fermented foods. And so, you know, people can look her up. They can look up the GAPS protocol. This is not a New York Times bestseller, trendy diet. This is old school grandmother wisdom foods. They heal. And that is because nature has a cure for everything. Every ill we have, she will cure it. And it's not going to, you're not going to have to mortgage your house to do so. But you have to, that's outside of the system. It's outside of the box that we have been raised in. So if I sound a little intense, it's because I shake my head at all the suffering that I see, the needless suffering in our culture. And having just been in Scotland, which was incredible, it was amazing there, but oh my goodness, the food that the people eat, it's just mind-blowing. It's horrible. All this convenience, garbage food and sugar constantly, all these cakes and donuts and garbage.
Yeah. My son definitely notices the difference of, you know, that I'm always in the kitchen now, and I rarely was before. And so I'm having a good time trying to explain to him as a 6-year-old what I'm doing. And what I've said to him is, and kind of shown him is, you know, that in the past, all of our medicine was in our food, and we were healthy, and they didn't really have doctors the way we do now. They didn't have the same kind of doctors and hospitals and shots and pills and things. And that at some point they took the medicine out of the food. So you have food with no medicine in it, and then you have medicine with no food in it. And they kind of show him the food and the bottle of the white pills. And so I'm saying, what Mom is doing is just is putting the medicine back in the food. So with all the fermenting and all of, the 72 hours of boiling my cauldron of broth, it's like, oh, Mom's just making sure that the food still has the medicine in it before she eats it. And he gets it. He's just like, oh, totally. That makes sense.
Yeah, because it's common sense.
Yeah, and so I was vegan myself for 14 years, and I actually had my herbalist teacher kind of break me of that, because that is what it took. I made a declaration at one point, the only thing that I know for certain is that I will be vegan till I die. I said that. And so, of course, was challenged on that immediately, and got to my herbalist apprenticeship after packing up my life and cashing out my teacher's retirement of New York to pay to go live on this goat farm and get this certification. And it was the second night there that she served the fish, and I said, oh, I'm vegan. And she said, well, you can either eat the fish or you can go home, because I'm not going to waste my energy teaching someone who's dying. She was just that clear. And so in that moment I had to decide, and I made the choice that my life and my path had brought me there, and it was a non-refundable apprenticeship. And so I said, I'm going to try it while I'm here, and I can always deal with the emotional or the boundaries or the philosophies when I leave, but I'm going to set that aside. I'm going to have this experience. And I was a lot healthier by the time that I left there, but still was just eating a little bit of meat here and there between then, which was maybe 6 years ago, and now. So being on the GAPS diet, it's the next step of that, where there is this level of visceralness of life in general that I think I was avoiding. So, within 1 week's time, I went to the butcher for the first time ever in my life. Then I picked a chicken for the first time ever in my life. And that every single day was first contact with some element of life that has been part of the human experience for all of time. This really intimate relationship and understanding of like where the food comes from. And it's like, yeah, it's gross. That's a carcass. There are gizzards in there, and it changes you to reach your hand in there and slide your fingers between the bone and the meat, and it feels like a reorienting on a lot of levels, and showing me where I was like lacking in intimacy with life and avoiding intimacy with these life and death processes, and avoiding intimacy with death even. And so it's been profound, the shifting. Yeah. And I actually, one more thing I want to add is that I'm having these very psychedelic experiences with animal fat, where I'm having dreams of like shape-shifting with the spirit of the fat and seeing it go all inside my cells and change the structure of my cells. And I'm seeing this in a really real way in the dream time. So, for people who might be listening who are just like, yep, no, not doing that. It's a very mystical experience once I lean into those places of squeamishness and discomfort. It's kind of the Kali experience of like, the resistance. You can be in the resistance for as long as you want, and it doesn't feel good to be in the resistance. So just go in there, and then it's very mystical and beautiful and educational and profound.
Yeah, well, plus, I mean, our ancestors and the women that, we in whose footsteps we are in now, would cull the chickens and, skin the goats and do all, they did all of this. And they were creating the foods that were keeping the family strong. And so, yeah, there was a very close relationship with our food and with life and death. And I will say also that I shop very consciously. I live in the Seattle area. We have amazing farmers markets. I was at the farmers market just yesterday with my daughter, purchasing my meat from Skagit River Ranch. I know George and Aiko. I know the farmers. I've been to the farm. I know not only how the animals are raised, but how they're slaughtered as well. And these people are good. They are true farmers. Those people are my rock stars. Those people are the people I admire greatly. It's a lot of work.
We're lucky in San Diego too. We have a farm called De La Ranch that is so beautiful, and you can go and visit and see how they interact with the animals, and they're so educated about everything that all of the animals, and you can get whatever you need for your traditional diets here in San Diego. And then I have a dear friend, Carrie Lou, up at Elder Farm, who's supplying raw goat milk to goats who are her beloveds. They are her sisters. They are her teachers. Like, they are the goddess. She tends them. Those goats get better treatment than most women I know in their relationships. Yeah. So I think that's definitely been a real bridging piece, like a piece that bridged me in to be able to allow myself this experience of consuming animals on this level, is to have those connections and those relationships locally.
Yes. And it brings us back into close relationship with the land and how it's farmed.
Well, something that my herbalist teacher, Susan Weed, used to say too was when I would be crying, swallowing the bites of fish, she would just say, listen, this is how it works on this planet. They didn't consult me when they made these rules. They didn't even ask me, but these are the rules here. First, I eat you, then you eat me. That's the cycle of life. And I came to see for myself that for me, veganism was, I was young and I didn't actually have the mental capacity to make sense of the kind of moral and ethical dialogue around factory farms and the meat and dairy that was presented to me. And so it was me throwing my hands up and saying, I am so disgusted with what's happening on this planet that I actually I'm going to take a step back from this planet. And this whole cycle of life and death thing, I am going to just hang out outside of that. Because I can't come to a good place on this for myself. So it was a way of putting myself in a little bit of a purgatory, pressing pause on my life, until I could figure out a way to plug in that I could be 100% yes to. And I really do feel that I've resolved that piece. And it's been a long, journey, been more than 15 years of asking those questions and trying the different diets. Yeah.
And then to be able to, just like you and I are doing, to source out these good foods, because will I eat meat from factory farmed animals? Absolutely not. Hell no. I do not support that deplorable stain on our culture. That's horrendous. No, I just won't eat meat then.
Yeah.
And, sourcing good meats, I'm able to do that. And those people need our support so they can continue to provide that. So we're fortunate we have a choice still.
Yeah, somebody said a lovely thing the other day, because something that I've noticed, and then a lot of resistance that I hear from people, is that it feels prohibitively expensive. Even if you were to buy a cow, when you start to look into that, it's thousands of dollars to buy this cow. But someone made it really simple, and they were like, well, either you pay the farmer or you pay the doctor. So I would much rather, I respond much better to systems of preventative medicine and that address wellness, and not wait till you get sick and, that they're very like immersed in the illness, you know. And then that there's just so many systems out there. It felt very heavy and very confusing of just like, well, listen to this person, listen to that person, do this diet, do that diet. So that's where it comes back to the grandmother's piece, is it's like, well, yes, that's kind of the point, is to keep us really confused out there so we don't make any decisions. And so when you get confused, just come back home to grandma, you know, come back to the grandmothers. And there's a simplicity in that.
Yes, and there's a wisdom in that. And there is also, it's this knowledge is tried and true. You know, that's why certain things have been around as long as they have, in terms of, you know, we're talking about healing foods, because they heal, because they keep the family strong. That was known. There's so much grandmother wisdom that has been almost all but lost in this culture. That's why I love Sally Fallon, because she has brought back so much of that, you know, and she's taken a lot of heat, and I've read some really disgusting, mean comments under some of the YouTube videos, but she is got such courage and such heart. And I've met her personally. I've had actually a few different conversations with her, and she's the real deal. She'd be a good one for you to interview.
Love that. That would be fancy for sure. So something that I always have to kind of check myself in is when I find myself speaking about energies that may themselves be present and be able to speak for themselves. So I'm curious, you know, we've kind of spoken about owl, we've spoken about the grandmothers, we've spoken about the fairies and the elves, and we're always kind of inviting those energies in to play with us in this space of this podcast. So yeah, I'm curious, as Senior Oracle, if you would be willing to try to tap in with and see if any of these beings are present and might want to speak or share in their own way. And, you know, if you want to read a poem now or do something.
Yes, I'm going to share a poem. This is how they have been speaking through me, is poetically. And during my trip to Scotland, I spent time in stone circles, and fortunately I bring my digital recorder with me everywhere I go, because I never know what is going to come through, and there's no way I can possibly remember all of the beautiful poetry. And since I've come back, I have been just channeling poetry constantly. And there is a particularly beautiful one that came through a few days ago that I shared with you that I feel is very relevant. And I also feel that this is what these spirits are wanting now, is for this kind of wisdom to come through. And poetry is a language of the soul. It touches people deeply and in a very different way than regular conversation. And so I will share this one that I call Stone Circle Whispers. The great stones that make circles round, strategically placed upon the ground. Beneath the ground, the circuitry of Earth's magnetics you can't see. Then there is geometry within the stones, again unseen. The math creates a frequency, a vortex that will help you see. A layering of energies found too in sacred groves of trees. The stones, like trees, are quite alive, programmed by wise folk who did strive to create earthly libraries for those seeking the mysteries. And in these circles are vibrations that are felt within your nation, designed to raise your frequency and open your third eye to see a kind of prehistoric phone, so that you'll know you're not alone. For these designs will blow the mind. The architects of these great finds gained access to colleges in the stars, from which they were given special powers. These architects knew someday the hour of ignorance would thoroughly scour the earth, whose good folk would be slaves, subject to false leaders depraved. Long past unwritten history, initiates of the mystery could see far flung of what's to come, the voices of the cycles sung, and so, preparing for the fall, great stones were placed in ways that call, inviting folk to stand within a circle round, where they'd begin to understand technologies designed to open eyes to see. These great stones hold the energy that long was placed by wise ones, we, the shining ones you call the she. The knowledge here will set you free. Allow us to take up your time with this very simple rhyme. We are an electric current flowing throughout time and space. When you activate in circles, you can take us any place. For those great circles were designed to activate us in your mind. Initiates stood in circle's center, calling in the ancient mentors. If you prepared with heart, mind ready, if you stand there tall and steady, if you're humble and receptive, we can give you your directive. You can tap your ancient lifetimes. We provide a kind of lifeline here for folk at any time, a pilgrimage to realign and speak with ancestors divine. The great stones may look old and battered. We will say it doesn't matter. Set in stone we once did cast. These places hold the knowledge vast. To those who come with right intention, we'll apprise them of inventions. They will work within their minds and bring them forth at certain times. And we think you would all agree that at this time in history, the secret knowledge these stones hold must be made active by the bold, who come to us from all directions, standing in these bold erections, called to visit wise ones tall, and break the spell that they are small. Many of you have come before, initiates old knew what's in store, as earth now stands before the door, a perilous time that you are in. How great the ignorance and the sin, as shameless leaders create spin that tricks the masses, sucks them in. You good-hearted ones who weep, for all the folk who are asleep, you are a living bridge of grace. We look with pride upon your face. Find a circle, sacred place, that when you see it makes heart race. Worry not if you can't get there. We are here to make you aware. The metaphor of circles divine concerns the power of your mind, whose faculties were overtaken by outside interests, those forsaken ones who think they run this place. Well, we are here to change the pace. Now let's get back to your great minds that hold a hidden wand divine. The time is now to learn to use this wand within that they've abused. Your thinking habits must be changed, your neural networks rearranged. It's time to call the knowledge back and access secrets old. This a task that you can hack. Rise to the moment bold. In the center of your chest, there sits a cauldron hot. Technology once placed in you that you have not been taught quite how to use effectively, and even, we'd say, magically, combined with mind that has been cleared, and then effectively it's steered. The correct weaving of these tools creates a kind of inner battery. In this way, you're no longer fools and prey to the false flattery of what the constructs of your day persuade you all to be. Instead, you'll find your own design that sets your good soul free. This wondrous treasure you contain turns on your DNA, and in a kind of fast forward, your ignorance you'll slay. The body vessel that you're in is really like a ship. It has for long been programmed one way. We're about to flip that program on its head and activate the codes within. But you must be on board for this in order that you win the prize of gold, the knowledge old of which you will remember. is found within that great cauldron, beneath which burns the embers that cast the light you hold within and runs the great ship that you steer. But that great light's become quite dim. Your enemy is fear. We seek to cast a spell here now through this delivered rhyme. We say to those who've waited long that you are in the time of cosmic forces opening, and shining ones with their great wings will call you from your slumbering to clear your mind of misperceptions. We will point to the direction you must look for the inception, bringing you a point of view that you will recognize as true. The cauldron stoked by your heart's light, magician's pyre you must ignite. Feel in your heart center palpably the presence of something you cannot see, but rather feel it presently and magnify it expertly. Be aware of this cauldron throughout the day that provides the medium for the fae. To undermine the spells of deception, we offer you a vast injection that enables you to feel the might of the beauty you hold, your true birthright. Combine the feel of cauldron and heart with the power of mind that helps you start creating in ways that summon light, that casts out the darkness of this night. For in your mind there lies the grail, whose powers it is time to hail. Let go the stories you've outgrown that keep you chained to a false home. Whatever you have thought to date, it's time for you to clear the slate and still yourself to feel the beat stoked by that magic cauldron's heat. Create a vision in your mind. Call back to you ancestors kind who'll help you fuel that ship you're in, who'll give you knowledge to begin to steer yourselves to waters calm, where you'll become the healing balm that soothes the troubled among your folk, and by example you will stoke their fire within so they can see that within them lives the mystery. This place within will set you free. It is with inner eyes you'll see. The veils are parting wide now, dears. We're in the time prophesied by seers, when communication will exceed what imagination can conceive, and you will know yourselves once again. Earth's people will once more be sane. And so know this to be your truth. Seek out our wisdom like a sleuth. We're found within that cauldron bright. We're here to help you end this night.
Thank you, Shonagh, for having the courage to walk your path and cultivate and share your gifts in service to the awakening human family. Well, I think that's really the most beautiful place to end, with that sensation that we can kind of continue to incubate in our hearts and hopefully take with us throughout the rest of our day. For those of you listening who are interested in connecting more with Shonagh, you can learn more about her classes online and in person, or work with her one-on-one, as I have, by visiting www.shonagholme.com. And thank you to all the benevolent beings in all the realms who've gathered here today to inspire, direct, and oversee the flow of this ritual conversation and activation. We dedicate any merits accumulated through this work here today to the benefit of all sentient beings. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be well. May all beings know joy and not suffer. Jai Ma, Amen, Namaste, blessed be, Aho, may it be finished in beauty. Remember, you have so much catching up to do. Thank you for your back, not forgetting about taking time to make passage, to walking passage through all the initiation, all your celebrations, showing up with our vibration, showing up for each one of us. Beloved, it's been 1,000 years. Love dry your tears. We're here. We're here. We're here. We're here.